All right, welcome to Lots of Gravel. Is that what we've decided? That's kind of a joke name, just on the gravel lot. Hey, but this is a parts bin episode that we are trying out because the biggest, hottest thing in the world of cycling right now is gravel racing, is GROAD, and I have the premier GROAD journalist in the United States, possibly in the world, with me here to help, Zach Schuster from Cyclocross Magazine. Hey, Zach.
How's it going, Bill?
It's going well. This is something like we just recorded an episode of Cyclocross Radio that I think that you were generous in allowing me just to ramble on about everything that is going through my head with the current state of U.S. cyclocross, and we are now moving over to gravel. And as much as I am talking right now, that is soon going to stop because this is your domain.
Sweet, I'm excited. By the way, I was pushing for CX Hair's GROADIO.
Oh,
that
that's
was my
right.
idea.
Yeah, no, that's actually, I like that. So we'll let the Gravelot guys off the hook that we're just not going to reverse their name. So let's just do, I think we should just do GROADIO.
GROADIO? Let's do it.
Yeah, it doesn't make nothing before it, just GROADIO.
It's perfect. You know, it's funny. I was just, we have I don't know when this is going to post, but I have an interview with Ted King, the defending king of Kanza, aptly enough. And so he's been doing all year this video series called the Dirty Kanza. And I've always been kind of like anti-GROAD, like just call it gravel. But man, I just started dropping GROADs left and right. And then when I taught Grammarly how to like just accept GROAD, I was just like GROAD, all GROADs lead to Kansas. So it really grew on me in like the span of editing a piece. It was really funny.
Just how the bikes, have somehow become, we have GROAD bikes now. Nothing makes me happier than being able to say, because I know it's like fingers on a chalkboard for people when you say, oh yeah, it's of course on that bike that's the GROAD Brifter.
Yeah, well, to be fair though, like I think the standard is that gravel is still really trying to figure out what it is and what it wants to be, and so we may end up calling it GROAD down the road, because there's gravel grinder, and I know the word gravel grinder like annoys people a lot, and from my perspective, I don't like it either. But when I trying to do like SEO, search engine optimization, I'm like, I have to put gravel grinder in this title and I don't want to do it. So you never know where it's really going to end up going.
In your typical gravel race, how much of the surface would you say is actually gravel?
Oh, that is a very good question. So this discussion recently came up with the Belgian waffle ride, and unnamed rider referred to it as a gravel race, even though it was really, it was like 30% like off-road. And so, they call it a spring classic. And so there was some discussion on the internets about, can you call it a gravel race? Probably not. I'm guessing, once like the Dirty Kanza, the Dirty Kanza is like 99% gravel roads. But I would say your typical gravel race, I would say, is probably about somewhere between like 60 and 70. The Flint Hills where the Dirty Kanza is, it's all gravel roads, like everywhere. There's like a highway that's paved and everything is gravel. Whereas some other places, I think there's more of the paved highways, and just by like the laws of geometry, you have to use some of them to get back home or out to, whatever feature it is you're going to ride. So yeah, I would say typically 60 to 70, but I think part of why Dirty Kanza is so renowned is in part because it's literally all gravel.
Yeah. But they still have, I just remember the thing about Kanza was the creek crossings that turned into river crossings some years. Is that still a thing?
Last year, I know they put like an actual creek crossing. Like the road that they were on just kind of ends at very much a creek. And there's like, you could probably drive a truck through there, but the road just kind of ends. And so riders have to, some of them tried to ride it. Some of them, Luke Keogh, cough, cough, with his road shoes slipped and fell in the water. So that was kind of entertaining to watch. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a number of events. I didn't see it last year. It was a very dry year at Kanza. But yes, that is a part of a lot of events. The Hilly Billy Roubaix, you've been there, right?
Yeah, which, I was going to bring up Hilly Billy Roubaix because one of the things that interests me in this rise of gravel, and it's actually something that we just finished talking about and that we've talked about in the past about cyclocross, is that Hilly Billy Roubaix used to be part of what was the Ultra Cross series, which I think was maybe 4 or 5 races. And series is something that you and I are, it's sort of tied to us for life. So is there a gravel series? Should there be a gravel series?
Ooh, wow. We're just getting right into
I'm getting right into it.
So I would argue that since we just came off talking about C1s and cyclocross, I would argue that there is somewhat of a de facto series of races that a number of the top riders attend. Was that mealy mouth enough? I mean, I think it starts with Land Run is definitely one of them. Belgian Waffle has become one of those rides. Dirty Kanza, Rebecca's Private Idaho, Crusher and the Tusher. There's a handful of the big races that you see a lot of the big names go to, but no, I don't think there is a series. Should there be a series? There are some that are sprouting up. There are a number of states that are doing one. There's one down in Texas. We saw the one up in New York, the Dirty Bike series. And they were super, Tony Seiler, the guy who does that, he was super generous because we saw this photo and there was literally neutral support. Like they had a moto kind of follow the lead groups, and it was of interest to us because it was Curtis White and Anthony Clark and Jeremy Powers were in the lead group, and they had a moto following them. So they opted to do a series, and he was really generous. We wrote a story about, neutral support and gravel and all that. So, I think what I like about gravel is that there's room for experimentation because it is unsanctioned. You can do whatever you want at this point. And it seems like, if there is a series, if someone is like, hey, I'm going to put together these 4 races and it's going to be a series and it works, then it works. But that's not really my decision to make. And if by the same token, if it doesn't work, then it's be like, yeah, we tried that. That's not going to be what gravel is. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like the proverbial Wild West at this point to me.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing and why I brought that up, and especially the Ultra Cross aspect of it. 2011. There was an Ultra Cross series. And Ultra Cross really, I know JR Petsko is always like, well, they tell me the rules are that you have to dismount at least once, during this 60, 70 mile race, whatever it is. But if you can ride it the whole time, I don't care. Do what you need to do. So, it sort of was, and especially with that race, which is a lot of, they're all state roads in West Virginia, although they have a different definition of what a road is. It's all, I think, pretty much falling into what this is, but there was a series. So it was Hilly Billy Roubaix, 3 Peaks, Iron Cross, and then Southern Cross.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of, it may be worthwhile going back and just exploring that, because I think that at least, I think that was kind of the roots of what's happening here, except people stopped, feeling like they had to shoulder their bike for any part of it, and it just became, these more gravel rides.
One of my favorite Bill Schiekens is Bill Schieken assignment editor, so I like it. He's one of my favorite Bill characters.
So there you go. Go back and do a retrospective of Ultra Cross. So it might be fun. Okay, but let's. I want you to, because again, I know this from the outside, but just a little history from you on the gravel scene, kind of where it came from and what it's turning into. You already talked about neutral support and those kinds of things. It seems like there is much like what we saw in cyclocross from the people who want to come out there and have almost a jungle cross race, that it's gotten too watered down and there's too many finger quote roadies who are in it now from when there was 10 or 15 years ago, and it's too competitive and not as much fun anymore. It seems like gravel is sort of struggling with some of those same issues, but at the same time, they are, I feel like, on a trajectory to become even more legitimate than cyclocross may be.
Yeah, obviously, there's a lot of other people who are much better about, in terms of speaking of the history, than I am. And it's been, a decade plus in the making. I mean, you look at like Trans Iowa was one of the first ones. It wrapped up with its 14th year last year. So it's nothing new. It's certainly been around, but I think that would actually be an interesting story trying to pinpoint, what has occurred to make it gravel into like the thing. I mean, just look at Sea Otter the last few years. It's, we saw like maybe a handful of new cross bikes and how many new gravel bikes. So it's certainly gotten the attention of the industry. I think
can I just have a really quick aside? And I mean this in complete seriousness. And I haven't heard anything about it, so it may already be talked about too much. But is there going to be e racing on gravel?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because that just when you said Sea Otter, that's all I could think about was like electric bikes.
Didn't we do an April Fool's story about that? We may have.
Probably.
This year. I think we did.
You're right up there on reality. Okay, I'm sorry. Go back to, yeah.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think one thing that appealed to me about gravel is the vibe reminds, despite everything you said about cyclocross, the vibe reminds me of cross. Like cross to me is super laid back. Like it's a chance to go see my friends, say hi, race, have a beer, see people, have a good time, chat, tell stories. And I think that's really what's appealing to people about gravel. And I think there's talks about whatever is happening at the front of the race. And I think there will always be those discussions. And it seems like this week with multiple world tour teams racing it, we'll probably hear some discussions about that kind of stuff again. But for your average person, it's a chance to go out and do something really challenging. That's fun. Everyone has their story. Afterwards, you have a beer. Like everyone comes back. Well, I mean, unless you crash or like have something horrible, but generally speaking, you make it back, and you have this really cool accomplishment that you did. So I think really that's why gravel is growing, is that a lot of people are doing it, challenging themselves, and having like a shit ton of fun doing it. If riding 100 miles can be a shit ton of fun.
Is it more in line of running a marathon? Is it an accomplishment with, a race at the front? And is that what is drawing more of an appeal?
I think it is. It's because it's hard. Well, it depends. For some people it is hard, but like doing a 100-mile ride is a very difficult accomplishment. You can be like, I went to Land Run and I did this thing and wow, I didn't think I could do it. And I think that is really appealing for a lot of people, is that it's hard, but at the same time there is an incredibly supportive community. And I was sitting in the with our boy Ethan Gladding, great dude, now is the official CX Hair's European correspondent, but we were sitting in the tunnel, the chute, the finish line at Dirty Kanza, which comes down Commercial Street in Emporia. It's incredible. There's all these people, like so many people just lined up, and every person's coming in and they're finishing whatever distance, and people are just going nuts and they're giving high fives. And like, I hadn't seen anything like that since I'd gone to the finish line of the Ironman in Madison. Same thing. Everyone's just going nuts. Like, you're an Ironman, blah, blah, blah. And it was incredible. I was like, holy shit. Like, who would not want to be a part of this? So I think it's really tapping into, we've seen it too with CrossFit. Like super supportive,
right,
very supportive aspect. Like it's not everyone's a winner. It's just that like everyone is part of the community. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is achieving something. And it's just really positive. And like, let's be honest, like cycling struggles with that a lot.
Yeah.
Just look at Twitter.
Oh, for sure. And, and even to the point that, and I think it's a lot of people who aren't even racing but are just observing, that are upset that these 3 EF rider pro tour riders are showing up and wanting to race in their sandbox. And I think that I go back. I think that older or younger Bill might have been more cynical about it, but now I see it as kind of a fun thing, and I'm kind of glad that they are there, and I don't think it ruins anybody's experience. It definitely brings up the profile of the race. It's not, there are only like 20 or 30 people that are really competing for the win in Dirty Kanza. So I think that's kind of a neat thing, that sort of gives it a little bit more of legitimacy and makes it a little more of the cycling zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think that, and I say this, we're Cyclocross Magazine. I'm going to cover the race that's occurring. My heart is certainly with like the average person because that's who I am. But, we're going to do that. But yeah, like the people at the front affect the races of approximately like 1% of the field, 2%. Like the average person like is going to do a 206-mile ride with a bunch of friends. And hey, that's pretty cool. Like I got to line up with some world tour dudes. Okay, they're gone. Well, anyway, now I'm going to have my race, But yeah, I think we saw last year there was some controversy around the race, and a lot of the commentary seemed to be coming from people who weren't necessarily part of the quote unquote gravel community. I don't know. It was just really interesting being there for I drove around. I saw probably more of that race than like everyone but the front of the race. So it was just kind of interesting seeing the commentary online and what people were saying versus like me being there, like driving several hundred miles in my rental car, seeing what was going on and checking it out and stuff like that. So yeah, it seems like there is some of that. I'm excited. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be really cool. This comes back to a discussion that we frequently have about cyclocross. Like one of your jobs as a professional athlete is to provide value for your sponsors. And I can tell you that EF Education First is going to get a shit ton of value out of having their riders at Dirty Kanza. Like, is all we're going to be talking about for like the next week,
I really want them to show up in baggies, though. I think that could be a huge boon for Rafa. I mean, they already have the bucket hats. I think,
that would be very fair. Yeah. No, it'd be cool. Or they like should have a special DK jersey.
Or at least, if anything, they should have the Rafa cargo bibs.
Fair, for sure. No, I think they could. And I think, honestly, doing something like that would certainly signal to the folks who have been doing it for a long time that, like, hey, we get it. Like, hey, we're here to party. We're here to have a good time. We're here to race. And I think that would be a smart marketing move.
Yeah, to go back to just, and let's just concentrate on Kanza for a little while since that's the one that's coming up. If I get my act together and get this up, it will be up before the race happens this coming weekend. I think that, I would like you to take us through just, you talked about the controversy, exactly what that was. I'm assuming it's what happened or didn't happen, or what the perception was of how Katie Keogh and Luke Keogh raced last year. But can you just touch on that a little bit, and maybe even have you had any discussions with the organizers for what, or have they announced any changes that have been made, or anything that's going to be different this year as opposed to last year, or is it just water under the bridge?
Have you literally been waiting a year to put me on this hot seat?
Yep.
Damn it! That's why I love you. Yeah, so I mean, like, the gist of it is the Dirty Kanza has a rule book. It has 25 rules in it, I believe. And so those are the rules, essentially, that you have to race by. But then there's this more nebulous idea of the spirit of gravel, which has not necessarily really been defined. Like, no one has really written down what the spirit of gravel is. But one thing that is interesting, very progressive, I think, about gravel racing is, one, good luck if you have payouts, not having equal payouts. But two, the men and women do the same course and they start at the same time, which is really cool. And it certainly creates interesting dynamics. So basically what happened is, Luke and Katie Keogh essentially rode the race together. They wanted to do it. They're married, and they wanted to do a crazy 206-mile adventure together. And they did that. We don't know. We didn't watch the whole race. She obviously had to ride the 206 miles, but, there were photos, including some that we did, where she was sitting on his wheel. And so there was a sense that perhaps, people accused her of cheating, which she did not do. I guess the larger question would have been something about the spirit of gravel. But yeah, I actually did. I talked to Jim Cummins and Leland Danes last week. And they were talking about this, and they were like, look, she followed the rules. She did not break any rules. There were probably, 100 husbands and wives who did this race together. It's all perfectly fine and well. No one cared. She was the rightful Queen of Kanza, and she won the race. Yeah. So that was their position. And, they had no plans on changing any rules, and she won.
Yeah, and I think that's the right call. It's interesting. I was thinking about that because one of the things that the Epic Rides mountain bike series does, which is very similar to the ethos of gravel racing, in that they have their rule book, I think, fits on one page. And this is a series that is giving away, like $100,000 over the course of the whole thing. It might be a little less than that, but it's a ton of money. Yet they really don't have a lot of rules. And one of the rules that they have as far as support is that racers can support each other, as far as, if you have a teammate and, you taco your wheel and they think you're a better racer and they want to give you your wheel, that's fine. But then they're done. Their race is over. They can't, there's no changing out wheels from a car or from anywhere else. You're basically got to race what you got. But that being said, the one rule that they are adamant about is that, and I don't think that the Kios did this, but this is the rule, is that if you think you're a smart guy and you found a loophole or some gray area in the rules and you take advantage of that and it benefits you and no one else, then they reserve the right to just rule against you.
Oh, wow.
And that is in the rule book. If you find something that isn't necessarily against the rules but gives you an advantage and is seen as a gray area, they're going to DQ you.
Yeah, so a lot of the gravel events, Gravel Worlds is one that I went to last year. They have like 8 rules, and like number 1 is don't be lame.
Right.
But I almost
the good
think,
old
like,
don't be a dick.
Yeah, but I think that Epic Rides rule actually is a little bit more definitive than don't be lame.
For sure.
By saying if it gives only a benefit to you, because like don't be lame, like anyone can interpret that however they want. That's interesting. But yeah, I know. I think that, for the most part, like Dirty Kanza, it was interesting hearing the discussion. They were like, how can we possibly, some people seem to be like, how can we possibly have this race if there's no rules? And it's, people are usually out there. They get it. Like if you're the stronger man or woman on that day, people are willing to tip their cap and say congrats. But at the same time, although the Dirty Kanza does not give payouts, there's a ton of prestige around winning that race. I think that one rider I look at is, Alison Tetrick won it 2 years ago. And she has a second life as a gravel racer, like her road career was kind of nearing the end. And she's just a great asset to sponsors. And part of that is because she won Dirty Kanza. Like, there's a ton of prestige around this race, so I get it. Even though there's no payouts, like winning DK is a BFD.
I didn't realize that there wasn't any payouts.
You get a belt buckle. You get a belt buckle.
It's amazing. That's good.
Land Run has no payouts. I don't know. Belgian Waffle maybe does, but like, you're still seeing pros, like an insane number, people like being like, this is my gravel program. It's athletes are finding ways to provide values for their sponsors by doing gravel while having a great time for the most part. But yeah, it's booming. Like there's this paradigm shift. That's cheesy.
It's okay. I use stakeholders.
There's like this shifting way of the way people are
recorded.
The way people are seeing gravel and the value that an athlete can extract from it is really changing rapidly.
My favorite thing to talk about, looking at the bikes, looking at the gear, what is the, I guess it's a more slack geometry from a cyclocross bike to a gravel bike. My guess would be one of the biggest differences is that many more people are racing tubeless during gravel.
Everyone's racing tubeless.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe tubes, but no one's racing tubulars. You'd be
Well, I didn't think
insane.
tubulars, but I mean, just from 10 years ago till now, I think one of the probably two of the biggest changes in races like this would be disc brakes and tubeless. And what then are people using Dynaplugs? Or is everybody just bringing spare tubes? What's happened when people are flattened?
That's a good question. So DK is a special case, and actually this was really interesting. We had a rider diary of just average Joe going to do DK, and Andrew, my boss, was like, anything interesting? I was like, well, he was talking about running tubes. And Andrew's like, what? Everyone runs tubeless. But at DK, they call them the Flint Hills, as Jim Cummins pointed out to me. He's like, they're pretty sharp. And so what you see a lot of is just sidewall gashes, not necessarily just flats, but like gashes. And so no Dynaplug is gonna fix that. And so it was interesting being like, oh, I could actually see where you would justify to yourself running tubes, because if your sidewall gets gashed, like you're not plugging that. But yeah, folks will use Dynaplugs. I think that's the first option. I know Sven. You could ask Sven if you ever chat with him again. He had the worst day ever last year at Dirty Kanza, and still came out smiling because he's Sven. But yeah, he flatted, and then he flatted again. He tore a sidewall, and then he ended up having to put a tube in after he tried to plug it. So yeah, I think a plug is your first bet, but then you have to kind of go to the tubes, and there's no neutral support. So that is one thing about gravel is there's no neutral support.
But is there personal support? Because I remember Sven, I think it was Scott, was out there changing wheels for him. Is that right?
Yeah, there's at DK you're allowed to access your team this year twice at the checkpoints, and that's it. There was the controversy of the the GCN guys last year, I guess, they videoed themselves getting assistance not at a checkpoint.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's the problem, with having a video show.
So I think they retroactively got disqualified. But yeah, so you can access them at the checkpoint. That's Trek's bike. That is Trek's at the checkpoint, which is also Trek's bike. Yeah, so they had extra wheels, tires, and stuff like that. So, but other rides, it's different everywhere. Dirty Kanza is very specific. Other events will have checkpoints. They may have neutral support. I know my favorite ride here in Wisconsin, the local bike shop comes down and they'll fix your bike up for you. So it's obviously different at every race. Every race. I mean, that's part of the deal. Is it's different everywhere, and you can kind of do what you want to make sure that your folks, your riders, get the best experience possible.
What do you think is the evolution? And we sort of touched on this a little bit, but I just want to know. It just kind of fascinates me about the rise in popularity and the competitor in this. And is this something that we're seeing that, we always looked at cyclocross before as being an easy point of entry into racing, where it used to be road racing was the only way that you were able to start racing bikes. And it was a pretty, harsh reality once you got in there, and a lot of people couldn't break through, and it wasn't a lot of fun. I think in the 90s, it was probably more mountain biking, but even mountain biking, especially back then with the, without full squish bikes and everything else, was a pretty hairy situation. And I think a little more dangerous than people were looking for. So it really fell to cyclocross as something that, hey, this is an easy way to get into. I can race. I'm not going to be even if I'm lapped, nobody will really know where I'm in there, but I'm never going to be, 10 miles behind the race. I'm always going to be in this park with my buddies, and it's fun. Has that now shifted over to gravel for new people? Or is it just people who are racing these other disciplines have had enough of racing, be it, the sort of shift over to sort of a Strava look at how competition works? Is that part of the equation? What's your take on it? What is this big appeal?
That's a good question. Can I do a quick tangent first?
Please.
I have to say, if you're talking about the younger age, oh my gosh, I went to the local Wisconsin mountain bike race over the weekend. The effect that NICA is having on mountain biking is already able to be seen. So I think for younger kids, it seems like NICA may take over the world. It was just unbelievable, the number of juniors, young kids that were racing in the elites and the comp field. So if you're young, it seems like mountain biking, thanks to the success of NICA, which will probably continue. But off that segue, so one really cool thing that gravel events are doing is they're offering all kinds of distances. For Dirty Kanza, you've heard of the Dirty Kanza 200. There's also the DKXL if you want to ride 350 miles.
Good Lord.
But there's also, I know, right? There's a 100, there's a 50, and there's a 25, and there's a high school race. So, I mean, if you're looking for entry point, you do what you can, and events are doing this. It's really, we've been covering a lot of events this year. Every event's we added a shorter distance. We added an introductory ride. We had one of the local elites come and they're leading a ride. So, I mean, you're talking about everything that we've wanted from biking, the bike industry, cycling, getting people involved. To me, gravel events are living it, They're saying, hey, come ride 13 miles. If that's all you can do, that's great. Be part of the party.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think on the racing level, I think you're seeing a lot of people that are just are tired of road. Who's it? To Be Determined is a blog out of the Northeast.
Yeah, in New York.
Have you seen? Yeah. Did you see where they looked at tracking Raspusica entries and kind of where those people were coming from?
I didn't look at it closely, but I do love what they do. I think they have some good articles there. So what they come up with?
I know, I was in awe. I was as a math guy, I was that's impressive. I mean, they found that it was having an impact on all disciplines, but it was murdering road.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what you're seeing. But for cross people, we saw Curtis doing a nice gravel season. Sickwat has been doing it forever. Anthony Clark, I've done some fun interviews with those guys. Sarah Sturm, who won Belgian Waffle, she's a cyclocrosser. So for cyclocross, it's perfect.
Yeah,
because it's a great way to get your base miles.
I wonder
in.
if she still considers herself a mountain biker.
I don't know,
because that's how she started. She didn't come out of nowhere. She's a pro mountain biker in Colorado, and then was hey, yeah, I think I'll try cyclocross. Now it's her at Rochester, where she's asking me. She's I didn't know how I didn't know how call-ups worked, or I didn't know how this. And I was oh, did I get points? And I'm okay, I don't think anybody's going to want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, I think one thing that is really cool, I think that seems to me to be appealing versus road, and other people can comment on this, but one thing that's really cool is that it feels like a legit road race. You're out on these desolate roads, you seemingly have them to yourself. You're not being confined by the yellow line rule. You're not in a pack where you can't pass anybody because of the yellow line rule. And there's a lot less negative racing because basically someone is going to be hammering at the front. So I think I think there's a lot about it that appeals to people from the race, if we're talking about the pointy end of the race, that experience as well.
Yeah, and that's really good. And you figure for that long of a race, it truly, I'm sure the environment is much better, especially once you're 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes down, in that it's just, everybody's kind of in it together, which is kind of cool. And then it also sets up, I sort of brought up the Strava part of it. It definitely sets up this opportunity, especially, although I guess DK has kind of thrown this into a bit of a change, is that you can go back every year and you can sort of test yourself against what you've done. So they already have this built-in measuring stick for you. But DK changed their course, is that right?
They did. They have a new course this year. They change it every 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
So last year went just due south. and this year is going due north. So it's pretty exciting. I'm really excited. I'm not going to lie. Last year, the course was basically a giant, like we'll call it like a giant box, right? So it just went down one side of Highway 99 and it came back on the other, which made it really annoying to try to follow the race because you're constantly guessing. Like you're just estimating a speed of like 19 miles an hour and you're like, all right, where are they at? How do I find them? And this year's course kind of folds back in on itself. It's like Reno Nationals versus Louisville Nationals, Bill, as a videographer, as a photographer trying to cover it.
Yeah, a lot less running in Louisville.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this year's course kind of doubles back on itself a lot more. And so, albeit it's on a massive macro scale, it's kind of like the old cyclocross course that gives you multiple shooting opportunities per lap versus one. And then you drive for half an hour and pray that they haven't gotten there yet.
All right, Zach. To put you on the spot, you're the expert in the field here on gravel racing. So do you have some predictions on what is going to happen at the front of the races at DK for the men and the women?
I don't know about predictions. That's really putting me on the spot. But I will say this. So I did this for Land Run because, you brought this up last year. I like stories. I really like narratives. I like stories. And, who cares about this race unless you know who's racing it? So I kind of took a chance and just started throwing some names out there. And I think fortunately, like 7 of the 10 people I shouted out at least finished in the top 5. So I was happy. Or I got whatever. But it was funny because I included a caveat. I was like, please feel free to use this as bulletin board material if I slighted you. And the women's winner, Nina Lachlan, she was really nice. And she was like, oh, I haven't been racing much. And so I read that and I laughed. And it's totally cool that you didn't include me. So I was like, whew. So anyway, long story short, plan on writing this tomorrow and going through it. But to start with the women, awesome group of women. I've gotten to interview a lot of them, write stories about them. They're super fun. You've gotten to interact with the panda herself. Amanda Nauman is always really great, and she's going to be one of those at the front. I think part of the challenge is identifying the ringers, the gravel ringers. Last year we saw the Little Badger, I think, was the top gravel ringer, and she came through in the biggest way by taking home the belt buckle, being the Queen of Kanza. But you've got kind of like your gravel regulars. You've got Alison Tetrick won 2 years ago. She's been all over the place. Amanda Nauman's won twice. Kai Takashita has been winning. She travels to a race literally every weekend and wins pretty much every weekend. She won Barry-Roubaix earlier this year. Super impressive from Japan. She's like the nicest person ever. If you see Kai, definitely go say hi to her at a gravel race because she's like the nicest person you'll ever meet. One to keep your eye on is the West Coast crusher making the trip over is Olivia Dillon. She's been just absolutely crushing the events out on the West Coast, Lost and Found. She won the Sagan Fondo. I think she beat Kat Nash at both of them last year. But I was going to ask you, ringer I have my eye on, Casey Armstrong. Should I have my eye on her?
You should
mountain biker, correct?
Definitely have your eye on her. I didn't realize that she was racing. She is coming on really strong in these Epic Rides Backroads races. I think she ended up in the top 10 for the most recent one in Grand Junction. And, it'll be a little bit of a change in that not as technical for what she's been racing, but definitely one to watch. And I think she's on a roll and getting stronger.
Yeah, and there were a couple, Anna Grace Christensen and Sarah Max both finished in the top 5 at Belgian Waffle. They're ones to watch. Amity Rockwell out of California. She finished 2nd at Gravel Worlds last year, I think, and she finished in the top 10 at DK last year. She's one to watch. Lauren De Crescenzo did a great story on... No, hers is a great story. Questionable how good I wrote it. But she's incredible. She crashed in 2016 and nearly died. Had a traumatic brain injury, and she's come back. She won the Crusher last year. And so I joked in the story, it's kind of like she got a second chance at life, but also gravel is kind of like her second life as a bike racer. And so she's really fun, and she'll be definitely a strong rider to watch over the course of that. So for the women, off the top of my head, I'm sure I'm forgetting a number of people, but without looking at the start list, those are some names to watch. Hopefully I got some of them right. The men, you obviously have to start with the king, Ted King. It works really well. Ted King, the king. Anyway, he's the defending champ. He's won twice. He's a former world tour rider. So he was kind of, although it was post-retirement, doing this before, I guess, being a world tour rider and doing it was cool. Peter Stetina is the winner of Belgian Waffle. And so funny story about Peter. So Dirty Kanza publishes their start lists, and you've probably heard of the lottery. You have to get in the lottery. And so I'm pretty sure he entered the lottery. So they've had the start list up on their website for a pretty long time. And I was like, oh, whoa, Peter Stetina, that's really cool. No one's really talking about it. So I interviewed him and I was like, hey, going to DK, right? And he's like, how did you hear that? And I was like, well, I don't know. It's on the website, bro. And he's like, whoa, you can't, man, we were going to announce that, make a big deal out of it. Can you and I was like, yeah, I won't publish it.
Oh, that's amazing. That's hilarious.
So that was pretty funny. I was like, dude, you're on the website. So he'll be joined by, oh man, I read the story, but I guess I didn't read it. It's going to be Alex Howes, Lachlan Morton, and
Taylor Finney.
And Finney. So those are the I think everyone is going to have.
Can we just throw King in there as a de facto EF rider?
I was going to ask him about that when I interviewed him. I was going to be like, so, are you going to be giving tips? Are you, still part of the program? Do you get in on this? Do you get to suck wheels? How does that work? But I didn't. So, yeah.
So you got one former, you got Ted King, former, well, I mean, I guess it was before EF, but still in that the Jonathan Vaughters program. You got Stetina, Trek Segafredo rider. That's some good firepower at the front of that race.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for those guys is Peter Stetina alluded to it when I talked to him. He's like, everyone kind of has their eye on you. No one's going to let you get away. You make a move early on, they're going to cover it. So I think that's probably one of the challenges that those guys will face. Another name, cyclocross name, Josh Berry. Do you remember Josh Berry?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, deep cut. We had a hilarious photo of him flexing in his Team USA kit when he was 17 or something. It was pretty funny. But he's another one of those guys. He's been doing some mountain biking. He's, I think, done some of the Epic Rides races. But
yeah, he did really well, I think, in Whiskey.
Yeah, so he's kind of established a second life, as it were, as a gravel racer. I think he's on the Giant off-road team this year, and so that's kind of a big part of what he finished second last year. It was really funny too. So both him and Ted King are Velocio ambassadors. So they had the same kit on, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at these two guys working together." And some people were like, "What's up with Ted King and Josh Berry working there?" And they're like, "We were just wearing the same kit. We're not on the same team." So in the whole whatever teams and stuff that came up last year, that was a funny side note. So he finished second. I didn't see if Kabush is doing it or not. He finished third last year. Had a good race. Matt Stevens.
Do you want me to give you a little inside information?
Yeah.
Jeff Kabush will be there, and he'll be looking spectacular in his skin suit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kabush is in. Can't count him out. He won't have aero bars. No aero bars for Jeff. No siree. And speaking of aero bars, Matt Stevens also finished in the top 5 last year, and he's one of the first guys to really, first man or woman to really just say, "Hey, I'm going to do gravel racing," and has done quite well at it. He won in 2017, and so he's always one to have your eye on. Yeah, so that's kind of like a round out of some of the men to kind of keep your eye out. Some of the men who did well last year. Drew Dillman crushed it at Land Run.
He is looking so strong. He's been out there, not necessarily his forte, mountain biking, but he's been at the last 2 Epic Rides races and looking great. It was kind of funny. Him and Brandon Fix actually were racing each other in the Grand Junction off-road. And Brandon came in and was basically like, "I could not stay with you on the climbs," talking to talking to Drew. So he's they're both doing well, and I think what he'll do something possibly in this race, but I think he's gonna be fun to watch when cyclocross comes around.
Yeah, I was gonna say, flashing back to the previously recorded podcast that will come out after this, Drew Dillman, cyclocross season. I think he's gonna make some noise. He's kind of got things settled down in terms of living out in California and not having a job that was taking up a lot of his time. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what Dizzle does.
Yeah, it's fun to have those guys showing up for these events too. It sort of mixes it up, but I guess that's also, him and Amanda, that SDG team. It's one of their priorities, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you knew that Drew was going to end up doing DK
right
the moment that he signed with that team. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure once I go through the list, there'll be other names that may pop up and ride their way into the top 5. I think a big thing, Kansas has been just getting like pummeled by rain, and so conditions will definitely could play a role. They always do. There's a certain thing of like with Dirty Kanza, a lot of the roads kind of have that deal where they have like 2 drive tracks, but then there's just a bunch of junk in the middle. And the problem is the junk in the middle is like flint rock. So a lot of mistakes that, like, I know Michael Vandenham made some kind of mistake similar to that last year, where you're like, oh, I'm not happy in this lane, I want to hop over the other one, and then you just gash your sidewall. So, flats could play a role. They derailed Ted King in 2017, and the gods of Kanza are merciless. Ask Sven Ness.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So, I think that will play a role if you're looking at favorites. It's like part of the goal is to not flat.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of like everything, right? You got to be good, but you also have to be able to race a clean race. And that's going to be huge. Well, that's fun. So when is your preview going to be showing up in the pages of Cyclocross Magazine?
Probably by Thursday. I should probably do it by Thursday so people can, so maybe be up by the time this is up. Yeah. And then everyone can tell me I'm terrible and I picked the wrong people and why did I forget blah, blah, blah.
It's why we do this, Zach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, I don't know. I really like it. I think there's a bunch of awesome people, and I guess just having some sense of like who's racing is interesting to me. And so I just assume that if it's interesting to me, that maybe there's at least like 5 other people out there who also find it interesting, like narratives are good. I think that's why part of what people like about sports.
When we do this again, when we have episode 2 of GROADIO,
it's got to be GROADIO.
GROADIO. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I got completely screwed it up already, like Charles GROADIO. We're gonna have to do a gravel heat check power rankings.
Yes. Okay, let's do it.
That will build the narrative. So we're gonna have to. We'll start it here, and then I'm gonna put it out there already. I'm gonna as Jalen and Jacoby would say, I'm putting it on wax. That we'll move it over to video at some point.
Cool, but we can book it for the DK roundup with the GROADIO power rankings?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
We're doing it.
I'm there. I'm awesome. So there, and by there I mean in my bedroom, talking to you on Skype.
Perfect. So you all listening to this on the Wide Angle Podium Parts Bin, the first ever episode of GROADIO, we'll have that to look forward to. We're going to catch up with Zach after DK, and he has taken it all in and is able to give us the full rundown of what went on, and then we're going to look at all of the gravel races that took place before that. We're going to put together the first ever GROADIO heat check power rankings.
This has a lot of, and I don't know what your algorithm is, but there's a lot of potential for what's the decay rate, and like when Nate Silver and his pole weighting, which races have more weight and what rate do they decay at, and
there is I can say this, there is a spreadsheet exists.
Okay,
that I will go that far, and we will be doing the same for the GROADIO heat check power rankings.
Oh, this is gonna be so much fun.
Fantastic. Hey, Zach,
Awesome.
thank you. This was cool. I know we started with kind of the overall, but then went into Kanza, but I think that worked out perfectly. And I'm looking forward to doing this again. You're going to convert me over to a gravel fan. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting. I think you'll like it. You like the vibe. Like
Yeah,
the vibe the vibe is good for sure. Yeah, although I was thinking about you and your tracking shots and how difficult those may be. I was really thinking about how that might work.
Do they have like lead vehicles? Do they have like are there motos out there?
Not at DK.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how it is at other races, but they just go. I mean, honestly, last year there was so much dust. Like I felt super guilty, like driving on the course because I was like, oh man, these people are suffering, and I'm just like, woohoo, kicking up dust in your face. So I really tried to avoid that, but there would be the potential for like, oh dude, it has so much moto potential, like those roads that just go on forever.
Yeah.
Dude, and your gimbal and your
may have to.
There's a lot of potential there, Bill.
It may just have to be the drone tracking shots. That's what I've sort of like been relying on for the first mountain biking. So,
okay,
that might be the answer.
You
Awesome.
know,
All right. So if you have made it through this hour with Zach and I, thank you. And thanks for tuning in to the Wide Angle Podium Parts Bin. What I would ask you to do is, if you like this, let us know. You know, we really want to know your feedback. You can just go on to Twitter and let us know there if this is something that you want us to do. How the Parts Bin works is that if these shows get popular and people want to see them continue, then we'll move them on over to their own feed. So maybe that's something that Zach and I will be able to do in the future, but we need to hear from you. And also head on over to wideanglepodium.com, check out all of the other shows that we have over there. And thanks for tuning in. And thank you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate this opportunity. It's been super fun. I haven't gotten to talk about this much gravel and like talking in a while, so it's been fun.
Awesome. We'll do it again soon.
All right, cool. Thanks, Bill.